This is the first Women of IPMI Leadership Salon. And we get started now. It's 11:05. We just wanted to allow a couple of people to join the meeting. And whoever will join a little later, Sandra, you take care of that. It's our producer, as you just said. So welcome, everybody. We are excited to have our inaugural Leadership Salon event today. The topic is From Struggle to Strength, Navigating Team Dynamics. But before we dive into the topic, let's talk briefly about our rules of engagement for this meeting, because we hope you'll participate after the introduction of the model that we would like to share with you and start a conversation. Please ensure that your name shows up in the window so that we know who is speaking or is raising their hand. Mute your mic, unless you're speaking, of course, which you have an opportunity to do later. To comment or to ask any questions, you have two options. You can either raise your hand and wait until you are being invited to speak, or if your environment does not allow for you to speak, please use the chat and put your comments and questions there. When we share, please refrain from identifying personal information. If you have to praise somebody, a name always helps and makes it even better for the person who's praised. And finally, when we ask you for questions, comments, and such things, please be concise so that we can hear from as many people as possible and have a lively conversation. And with that, I'd like to introduce the team that organized today's Leadership Salon. We start with, on the left, with Lynn Davis. She is with Fidelity Trade. Then we have Lauren Moisey. I hope I pronounced that right today, Lauren. I tried hard. She is with Vision. Can you just wave briefly that people know who you are? Yeah, and Lynn, perfect. The two of you will actually monitor the chat. So if anything is going on there, the two of them will keep an eye on it. Then next comes Julie Doherty. She's with BASF, and she will pay attention to who is raising their hand for any questions or comments that we have, that you have. And then, of course, on the very right, it's me. It's Regine Albrecht. I'm with Basic, and I will presenting today. And with that, let's briefly talk about the agenda, what you can expect today. We first will go over what a team is and what is not a team, so that we're all on the same page and know what we're talking about. And then we have a quick poll. With the poll, we follow up with an introduction of a model. That whole leadership salon today circles around that model to help people and to help teams to get better and have the opportunity to improve. And we have some interesting topics that may actually sound very simple if you read them. So it's not rocket science, but putting them into work, putting them into everyday life and work on them continuously in a team is not as easy. And I'm sure you will agree after we have talked about this. Or when we open the discussion, because we would love to have your opinion, we would like to have your questions, concerns, or if you have any successes to share, hey, please do that as well. Then at the end, and that will be around 12-ish, we will wrap up at least the conversation and everything that's going on about team and all other discussion points we had. I would like to take a couple of minutes to have a brainstorming session, very briefly, 5 to 10 minutes, so that we can collect some ideas from you, what topics would be relevant and interesting to you for our next Leadership Salon. And with that, maybe as an introduction, a little bit of two quotes that spoke to me. The first one, I think, is kind of obvious. Teamwork, simply stated, is less me and more we. And I like that one because it really speaks to what we're talking about today. Great things in business are never done by one person. they are done by a team of people, because many people contribute ideas, thoughts, avoid problems, and find solutions that are better if it would be just one person. So I thought that's a really good start. And with that, let's move into our very first part, and that is actually the definition of team. What is actually a team? To clarify that and to make sure we are talking about the same thing, a team is usually a small group of people, suggested are 3 to 12. And this group of people is actually working on common goals. They share responsibilities for those goals, but they also share the rewards that they achieve while working on those goals. And the rewards may not only be that they reach their goal, but there may be other things along the way, personal growth and growth as a team and all these things. What is not a team? And I think this is really important. It is a group of people that actually only reports to the same manager. They don't have any interdependence and they don't really need to work together and have no mutual accountability, which a real team that works together has. They work together, they rely on each other, and they have a lot of communication across the team and not just to one person. And with that, I actually would like to invite you to raise your hand and say who of you is actually part of a team or is leading a team. Can you raise your hand and somehow indicate on who is part of a team? Okay, I see a couple of hands here. I just go and see. Yeah. Okay, let
50%, at least 50%.
Okay, good. I beg to differ that I'm sure if you consider your life, and probably not just your professional life, that we kind of all are in teams. Teams can be considered also as a family because you work together, you have certain goals that you achieve together. I just want to make you aware, if we're talking about this working in a team or getting better at a team, it is not just relevant for the work environment. It is true for pretty much every team. And that is why, again, I said I dispute a little bit that you are not in a team or that you're not leading in a team. Pretty much everybody is somehow, some way, in some shape or form part of a team. Let me introduce now the model. It is a model, excuse me, introduced by Patrick Lencioni. It's called the 5 dysfunctions of a team. He calls it dysfunctions because these little things creep in very easily and are not necessarily noticed because they're not necessarily really obvious. Some are not. And the first building block and the most important building block of the model is actually the absence of trust in teams. And he thinks it is very important to have trust in a team because only if you have trust, you feel comfortable in sharing problems, meaning sharing problems in terms, oh, I see, I have a weakness here. I have a question. I honestly don't know if what you just suggested is working, and bringing these things up. It is a trust that goes to a very basic point in which you can really talk and share everything with a team. I'm not saying sharing things that are not project related, but everything that is related to your project or everything that is related to the goal of the team that you are working in or that you are part of to make it better. Because if you have that trust, and that brings us to the next point, you are able to raise or have conflict in a team, because for human beings, it is not very common that we like to argue, that we like to contradict people. It is not in our nature. We feel far more comfortable if we can agree to something. But for the purpose and for the success of a team or for a project that we're working on, it is extremely important that all thoughts, considerations are put on a table, that they are challenged, and that people ask questions. Question in terms of if somebody makes a suggestion, says, oh, I think this is the best way forward because X, Y, Z, and somebody says, yeah, but isn't that far too expensive? Or have you considered this point of view? If that is not going to happen, we do not have all the possible options or considerations that are relevant to come to a really good solution or conclusion, depending on what your project is. And that is why it is so extremely important to be able to utter all these things. And that can often be in a very passionate way. The positive side of that is also that if you do that, you have really lively meetings, and not one of those boring meetings where people basically say, oh, yes, I agree, or I don't have an opinion on that, but they still harbor the thought, there is something not quite right. Everything has been brought to the table. It was challenged. Questions were asked. Things were clarified so that everybody really understands what's going on, how to see the goal in the context of the whole scheme of things. So then, and that actually leads us to the next point of view, then it allows us also to commit to it. Committing in a sense, yes, even if I don't agree with you, even if I may not have exactly the same opinion or don't think that is the absolute best solution, but the way you describe and the circumstances that we have currently right now are the ones that allow me to say, okay, with what we are deciding here in the meeting, I can go forward with this and I can agree to this. It doesn't mean consensus in general, but it means I can say yes to it and I can work toward that goal and can support the team in every possible way to reach that goal. And with that, we come to the avoidance of accountability, or sometimes accountability that is lacking. Because if we don't have that commitment, if we cannot say, okay, we have looked at all the various aspects for a certain project, we looked at the financial impacts, we looked at the various processes that might be involved, we look at how we can present it, and the different ways we have asked questions and really know what's going on. Then we can say, and this is part of the commitment part, we can say, okay, now we can create procedures and we can work towards those procedures. We can say, okay, this is how we will approach that goal. This is how we aim to achieve that goal. These are the various activities that we do. These are the deadlines that we have set, and that makes it important for everybody else in the team, because then they can hold each other accountable. And it's far more likely that that happens not necessarily only by the leader of the team, but by anybody in the team or amongst peers, because they see the purpose. They know this is what I agreed to. This is what I agree to for my team. Sometimes there are sub teams. And yes, this is the way we go forward. This is what we decided, and I'm behind that. And if you have achieved that, the last part is actually the inattention, or if you put it positively, the attention to results. Because if teams agree that they put all on the table, meaning they had a really, really good debate about what's going on, they committed and said, okay, we may not all agree on the same path forward, but we can say yes to what we agreed here and can make that commitment. Then we can say, okay, these are the steps forward, and we hold each other accountable, and we follow those steps and can actually reach the results and the goals that we had set out to do. It also helps that if you work cohesively in that team, and if you consistently apply these various steps or keep them in mind, there is less personal aspiration not because people don't want to improve or don't want to climb the corporate ladder, but they focus on the project of the team and put their energy towards that. There is less competition between teams because, again, teams try to work together and make a particular goal come into life and put it into the world. And this is why these 5 steps are so tremendously important. And Patrick Lencioni, who is a consultant and who actually worked with an awful lot of how is it called? Big companies, let's call it big companies. He has worked with sports teams. He has worked with the military. It all came down to the fundamental part of having the trust to build from there on all the other aspects of this pyramid. There is not one aspect of it that you can work on, say, oh, the others are not that important, because they all tie together. And I hope I made that clear in the explanation that I gave for each one of them. Because if you don't have the trust, for example, you will never be able to put out any kind of argument and say, you know what, I don't agree with you, and make your point for anything, which then leads to the fact, oh, if I haven't put up that I am not agreeing with it for whatever reason, I may not be able or may not want to commit to what's coming next. And this kind of is this chain reaction, and establishes itself in having a lot of discussions, but never ever really reaching the goal, having a hard time reaching the goal. Sometimes it goes even as far as not having a goal clearly defined in general, meaning you have discussions going on, and you say, oh, we have to work on this, we have to work on this, we have to work on this, but there is no specificity what it actually means. We want to bring a product on the market. What is entailed in that? Do we have to do any more development? Are there any complaints, let's say, from customers because we improve a product? Are there any complaints that that's really necessary? Or is it just we have more competition and we need to present or place our product in a different way so that we gain more market share again? Now, that all starts, if I don't say, hey, these are the aspects that I see really relevant for that particular product, for example, then we cannot go through all the other steps and be successful as a team and reach a better placement or gaining more market shares, because we have agreed on how we go about this. There's one also very important aspect when we're talking about the accountability, and that is, it is not just the team that agrees on it, that says, okay, this is what it is. It really has to clarify what they have agreed upon. The reason for that is simple. If you in a meeting and at the end of the meeting you ask, okay, what is it what we have agreed on? All of a sudden, people come with different versions of what they thought was actually agreed upon, which can have various reasons. So asking that question at the end and asking, hey, what's actually what we have agreed upon? And making it clear and say, this is it. And then also saying, okay, that's the way we communicate it. If you are a team leader, this is the way we communicate it to our team, so that our teams, all of the teams that have to work together, it might be marketing, it might be sales, that they all are on the same page and follow the same goal that is defined clearly and without confusion for everybody who's working on it. Having said that, it requires people who are actually willing to work in a team. Not everybody is or can work in a team. Not everybody is made for teamwork. So one of the basic things as well to get this kind of model going on and work in your team with it requires that you have people who are willing to do this and who are willing to open themselves up for the purpose of that goal. And it's not just the team leader who has to kind of push that it goes in a certain direction. The beauty of this model is actually the more it is implemented and the more it is refined and becomes a regular part of the working of the team, everybody is kind of pulling on the same string, and people or peers hold each other accountable or support each other. And I think this is another aspect. Of course, it is always relevant that the team leader, no matter who that might be, small team, big team, it doesn't matter, has, of course, to be a role model. You cannot expect your team to be honest, to admit to a mistake, for example, if you as a team leader don't do it yourself. So this is fundamental, but it's not just true for the team leader, but again for the whole team. And with that, I think we have seen the model. I hope you understood it. If you have any questions, please raise your hand. If you don't, I would like to ask you a question. And the question is, having heard what I explained right now, on a scale from 1 to 10, meaning 1 is really poor and 10 is meaning really excellent, where do you feel your team lays? Where is overall in the whole scheme of things, where do you think, or how do you think your team is doing? We can put that in a chat, or we can also put this, we can unmute and somebody can share and maybe say a couple of words to that, why it is great, why it might need a little bit of help. Do we see any responses here?
Yes, I think Lynn and Lauren will monitor that, but it looks like we've got 5s and above, really, so far. Nothing below 5, which is great.
Yeah.
But nothing
With the
above.
highest being 8.
The highest being 8. Okay. Oh yeah, now I see it here in the chat.
Yeah.
Perfect. Good. Which of course begs the question, what makes you think that it's a 5, a 6, a 7, or an 8? Do you have any idea where in those 5 categories that I just described, where the issue might lie? Is it the basics, the basic thing, the trust, or is it something else that you actually think you need to work on or need to help your team to get better at?